All right, and we are live. Hello, New York. I'm Zain, a residential real estate agent in Manhattan, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us on another live REDinNYC virtual interview. REDinNYC is a networking event series dedicated to connecting and supporting the professionals who work in our dynamic, ever-changing real estate industry. At all events, whether in person or online, it is our intention to create an environment that's welcoming and upholds the values of respect, fairness, and unbiased access to opportunities. In Manhattan, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us on another live REDinNYC virtual interview. Give me a second while I mute that. All right, a little audio difficulty here.
Just wanted to be heard twice. That's in stereo.
Oh, that went through on yours also? Well, this is a learning process and we overcame it. But just to continue, we need to be mindful and set time aside to be introspective and really examine the impacts that our internal beliefs, rhetoric, and actions can have on our broader community. Let us recognize that each member of the community is capable of playing an active role in discussing solutions to the issues that plague our city. And let us remember that we all stand to benefit from a unified New York. Now, before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors for their continued support of REDinNYC. CNA Seneca Construction, Skyline Scaffolding, Champion Elevator, Remax 100, City Bay Capital, Property Shark, Hydrotech Environmental, Clean to Clean, Eco Safety Consultants, and View. If you're in the market for these services, we recommend you send them an RFP or just even reach out to get a second opinion and take comfort that they share the same values as REDinNYC. And now I would like to introduce our two distinguished guests this morning who are here with us to discuss their business strategies during the pandemic and their plans for the future. We're joined by Kent Swig and Wendy Kraft. Kent is the owner and co-chairman of Terra Holdings, the parent company of several successful real estate firms, including Halstead and Brown Harris Stevens. Kent is the president of Swig Equities, a real estate investment firm that since 2001 has developed and purchased over $3 billion worth of office properties and several Manhattan residential buildings with over 1,200 apartments. He's also the owner of Helmsley Spear, America's oldest continually operating commercial real estate company since 1866, and he's the president of the Swig Company, which has a portfolio of over 9 million square feet of prime office space across the United States. Kent also owns Falcon Pacific Construction, which specializes in ground-up and building-wide renovations, and he serves on the Downtown Alliance Board of Directors. Kent Swig has spoken at one of our REDinNYC events last year and is set to receive the REDinNYC Distinguished New Yorker of the Year Award at this year's ceremony later this summer. So congratulations, Kent.
Thank you very much.
Wendy Kraft is the chief of staff at Fulcrum Equities, a single-family office that brings an owner's eye and perspective to its investment practices, monitoring, and asset management. She's also the founder of Focal, the Family Office Center of Analytics and Training, which is a community where family offices receive insight and training for building a multi-generational financial infrastructure. And at Focal, advisors and service providers also learn the most effective ways to cultivate lasting relationships with family offices. Wendy actively serves on the NYU Stern Business School Family Office Committee and the NYSS CPA Family Office Committee. Wendy is also a Family Office Exchange Advisory Board member, and she has been named one of the top most influential women in private wealth by Private Asset Management magazine. Kent and Wendy, thank you for joining us on REDinNYC.
Our pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's begin with the effect that the coronavirus pandemic has had on our city. Right now we're in the middle of this crisis. The death toll caused by this virus has just reached unimaginable numbers. And in order to flatten the curve, we've all had to make major adjustments to our lives. And I just have a few facts here since the pandemic started. New York City specific facts. So according to the Department of Labor, As of May 23rd, this is the most recent report that they have, about 1.14 million New York City residents are claiming unemployment benefits. And that's compared to just 67,000 during the same period last year in 2019. Forbes says that the New York State unemployment rate is at the highest level since the Great Depression. And a bit of residential real estate stats, according to Property Shark, New York City-wide residential sales across all boroughs has fallen year over year. In March 2020, it's down just about 6.23%, but then in April, it went down 60.59%, and in May, down 52.51% year over year. Kent, what do we make of this? What's your take on the Manhattan residential real estate market?
Before I go in, I just wanted to just make one statement and say hello to everybody and welcome. But you know, this is the last time the United States was involved, or the world was involved in a pandemic, was 1918 with the Spanish flu. And obviously it has dominated the headlines and our lives. And who would think that the worldwide pandemic would be pushed off the front page and the #1 news story in favor of another story? So we are living in extraordinary times. And it's you know, compounded by what happened in Minneapolis, which was a tragedy among tragedies. So I do want to say this, though, because, or partly because I think we're in this pandemic and everybody is at home and sheltering in place, the new term SIPPing, right, our new acronym, it's given us pause for inner reflection and some thought. And I think with the tragedy that's happened in Minneapolis, and on top of the pandemic occurring, is given a new focus on a national and international basis for some of the terrible events that have occurred in our country's history. And we could take an optimistic viewpoint potentially, and saying that with our moment of pause that we've had while we're sipping here, sheltering in place, we've been able to really look at ourselves, our society, and it's given new impetus to being looking at equality and leveling the playing field of a very unlevel playing field for our country's history. So while this is a tragedy and a terrible thing that's happened, I think it's incumbent upon us as citizens to have that inward reflection, and outwardly to be able to go out and make corrections. And I think for an optimistic viewpoint, this may be the one time that we've had in our country's history that everybody is focused on what the tragedies and what the events were in Minneapolis, and actually seeking major change. First, an acknowledgement that we do have these problems, and two, to really make some significant change. So, you know, I'm optimistic for our country's progress that we can ultimately make for a very, very unfair platform, you know, of life right now in America. So I'm hoping that we take this and really move forward in a positive way. So what is it now? Your question about residential.
Yes.
First of all, the residential marketplace is obviously dramatically downwardly impacted by the virus, right? So nobody's going out and looking at homes, and nobody wants people in their homes to go look. So clearly, it's a reflection of the rest of the economy, it's grinded down to, you know, a crawl rather than where we have been. Prior to the virus, I would say that we were in one of the unique markets ever, in that the market was impacted negatively with the amount of super high-end product that was brought onto the marketplace. And that product was brought on for you know, people were building and developing projects that were really geared to billionaires, right? There's 2,500 billionaires in the world. And how many of those people were going to buy product, apartments, condos, et cetera, in New York City that didn't already have one? So we were already in a position where we were we had an irrational exuberance of thinking that there was no price ceiling whatsoever, and that we had unlimited buyers for a super, super high-end luxury market, which doesn't exist. So I think that pressure, combined with the ebb and flow of normal business, which was that apartments were very, very expensive. And we had a short supply of apartments for years in New York City. And that created a price threshold at which buyers were saying, no, the prices are just too high. So that was a normal ebb and flow where prices became so high that buyers started to slowly withdraw out of the marketplace, compounded by an oversupply of product for a market that is razor thin at best at the super high end luxury. And that had brought activity down and prices down over the past 24 months prior to the virus, where the opportunity to buy was one of the greatest opportunities ever. We had full gainful employment and we had prices that were falling. That had never happened really in New York's history. Now we're in an environment, as you mentioned, that over 1 million people have filed for unemployment. Those people aren't going to be in the marketplace buying. So that's going to put further pressure and strain on what was already a strained marketplace. Interest rates are at an all-time low. So if one has a position to be able, financially in a position to buy, I think it's one of the greatest opportunities to buy, because looking at New York City over time, New York City has always come back and strengthened. And the key for that first is to find two things. One is a therapy for the virus. So if you do get sick, you will not die. So we need to have some kind of medical therapy. And the second, obviously, is a vaccine, which is probably a little further out, into the 2021 year. But when that happens, New York City, I think, will regain itself and move forward. People want to be in big urban centers and want the energy and the activity of an urban centers, with the caveat that it's safe. So again, it's dependent upon a therapy for if you have the virus and a vaccine ultimately. And we will be back. If you look at the roaring 20s that followed the 1918 pandemic, 350,000 American lives were lost and 65 million people were lost worldwide in that pandemic. And yet by the 20s, people were jitterbuggering and drinking and going out and active in major cities. So we will be back. The process is going to be a painful one.
Yeah. I agree with that perspective, and I definitely, I want to be back in the city. I miss the energy. I miss all the people. I miss interacting with, my colleagues and my clients, and just everything about New York, the restaurants, the energy. Really, it's something that I miss a lot. But sort of from a higher level picture, opportunistically for Terra Holdings in the last cycle in 2019, your intuition told you this is an opportunity to expand. And so, you bought a few brokerage firms out in Connecticut, Florida, New Jersey. So I'm curious, what does your intuition tell you this time around with the coronavirus?
Well, the last time was in 2008. So really in July 08 to July 09, the marketplace went down plus or minus 20% or so in terms of pricing, and transaction volume, which was at a peak prior to that, dropped almost 45%. So what our instinct then was, New York will come back. This was a cycle. This was a down cycle. This was a financial global problem that happened. And we had faith in that process and bought, we almost doubled in size between Terra for Brown, Harris, Stevens, and Halstead. This is not one of those times as much. There is less predictable. This is going to depend on a unique set of circumstances, which is that people feel safe to be in center cities. So again, it's contingent on a therapy if you have the virus, and a vaccine ultimately to prevent us from having it. Unfortunately, America from a national level dropped the ball on the ability to go test and protect our population. The CDC really was our sixth branch of civil defense or national defense, right? You've got the military in its 5 branches that we know, from the Coast Guard, Air Force, Navy, Army, Marines, and then the CDC was there. Unfortunately, our national administration right now took the CDC off of the National Security Council, had cut 18 and 16% respectively over the past couple of years out of that budget, and left us unprepared. So when you look at other countries, they engaged, the World Health Organization, who came to us on January 4th with all the tests that we want, which was rejected by the Trump administration, foolishly, in my opinion, and we left ourselves vulnerable. So now we don't have a baseline, medically speaking, on which to measure where and what's happening. So the first thing we need to do is to be able to roll out both testing for if you have the virus and the antibody testing if you've ever had the virus. So that once that gets out and we get some form of baseline to find out who actually has had the virus, because the who's had it is a lot higher than statistically showing right now, then we'll be able to figure out what to do and what kind of programs we really need to do in this country. And then the second thing is, and again, is that we, in my opinion, do not have 50 state issues. We have one federal issue. Problem is that we've got a government in Washington, D.C. that's telling us we have 50 state problems. That is not the case. That is a divisive, splintering effect. We have one America, and we have one major national problem that needs to be addressed from the national level. And when it is, we can adjust with 50 different types of responses, but it needs national leadership and national rules and national ideas. And so that is lacking. So what are states doing? They're combining together the whole Northeast. All the governors are working together, making sense to figure out some kind of policy regionally, at least. So I think the lack of leadership at the top has certainly exacerbated the problems that we're having, but we will overcome that. Once these things get through, within whether it's a year or 2 years, people will be back out. They will be at restaurants, they will be at bars, they will be going out to clubs, and we will be reigniting the energy of New York City and other American cities. But until that time, and that we establish some kind of program, it's going to be a little bit of a difficult time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think practically it makes a lot more sense to pool our resources together. I mean, 50 states are way more powerful than the Northeast region and all these different regions independently.
I'll give you an example. If Russia, Lord forbid, attacked the state of California, it would not be incumbent upon Governor Gavin Newsom to send out the military to go defend California. That would be a national major problem, and our national military would be protecting each individual state collectively.
Yeah.
This pandemic is a national problem.
It's a national problem.
To make it a local state problem is a foolish thing. So anyway.
It is, yeah, and we do need a coordinated effort. But steering away from politics, you bring up developing a therapy for the virus so that people don't pass away from it, and a vaccine. How long do you think after those two are in place will people regain that confidence to live in these dense urban environments and return to New York?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to answer that as an age answer, age-driven answer. I think the younger population will feel more secure and more comfortable and will be the first to re-enter the bars and restaurants. I think the elderly population will be the last to enter the bars and restaurants, and that obviously is commonsensical. It makes good sense. And then there's the in-between. So as people feel comfortable going back, I think it will be led by the younger generation going back out. And I will give you an interesting statistic of what's been happening right now. So in the commercial sector of the marketplace, people have probably read that Facebook had taken 1.5 million square feet roughly in the Hudson Yards project, and that was done pre-virus. They're about to sign an additional, in the middle of the pandemic, an additional 750,000 square feet at the Farley post office building on 8th Avenue under Vornado. And here they were talking about working from home and doing things like that, and yet they're committing to another 750,000 square feet in Manhattan. If Facebook is on the technology leading edge of America, that tells you something of what their thinking is. And they've been guiding people to work from home, and they clearly are a technology-driven company that can do these things from home, and yet they're coming in. So it will be back. And I'll give you a good example. A friend of my son's works for a very major Wall Street firm. So anecdotal story. He's very efficient in his business. He works from home. He's doing all his work. He's reporting directly to his boss. He works in fixed income. His preference would be another part of that company. And where is he ever going to go meet his boss's colleagues, where he can just shoot the breeze and say, gee, you know, I've been working here. What are you doing? Oh, maybe you'd be interested in coming over here. So his boss's colleagues are sitting next to them across in offices. He'd be in a cubicle. So the only way for him to talk to those people is to cold call them. That's just not going to happen. So is his business very efficiently done? Yes. Is his opportunity and creativity stopped? Absolutely. And that's the problem. That is why getting into urban dense areas like New York City is opportunistically and creativity very important for business. Can we function efficiently? Yes, but it's not going to offer opportunity and creativity in that. So yes, and I think that will be guided by the younger people when we get back in. I think that's why Facebook recognized it needs to have people in offices. It may need social distancing, it's taking more space, but creativity and opportunity doesn't come by working in voids and cylinders and silos, right? So.
Right. I want to bring up just an article that I read in the Times. It was a May 15th article, and they shared 3 separate estimates about smartphone location data. They're tracking us all, right? To determine how many people left Manhattan. And they estimated that Manhattan's population, these 3 different estimates, were between 12.9 and 18.6% of people in Manhattan had left since the pandemic began. What are your thoughts about that? And should we be concerned that these people may never return?
Well, one thing, Wendy is sitting at her home and sheltering in place. I'm sitting in my home sheltering in place, both of which are not in Manhattan. So on your statistics, we're one of those people who are not in Manhattan. Do we intend to go back? Wendy, you're going to go back into Manhattan?
I'm going back, but there are a lot of people up around here who are from Manhattan who have second homes here and in Connecticut and a little farther in the Catskills. And they've just left the city for the duration of the pandemic. Right. They're going back.
My point is the statistics are not, they reflect, they're 100% accurate, but they may be also 100% meaningless. Right? So we've got to be careful how we use statistics, because the conclusion we draw from statistics is an extrapolation of those statistics. So it doesn't read the minds of what those people are doing. Physically, they are not there right now, like me, but I'm in Manhattan once a week. I continue to do business. I'm not leaving Manhattan. It's my home. My children are 2 of them are in Manhattan. 2 of them are here with me. So it doesn't read what our intent is. It only reads where we are. So that statistic is interesting. I think that is a reaction to people who are, sheltering in place in other locations, and doesn't read whether their intent is to go back to work or not. But I just want to add.
I just wanted to add too. You had a lot of college students and university students in Manhattan when this started, and they had to leave. The school said, you need to go home. So part of that chunk of people have left are really students too. So it's across the board. Be careful how you look at it.
Your question is the ultimate question. It is a perfect question. Will people feel safe in urban dense environments? And that is why I answered the question that you first asked in 2008 and 2009, when Terra Holdings expanded so much. We're not now. This is a different environment. So we need to see what's going to be happening. So New York City is the densest city in America. We have, 28,000 people per square mile. San Francisco is the next highest density city in the country at 17,000 people per square mile. And then it falls off accordingly. You've got Los Angeles, which is, massive suburban sprawl, concentrated a lot of people, but all over the place. And so the question is, when do people feel comfortable and safe to come back? And then will they? And I think that is not an answer that can be easily answered quickly until we see if we have a therapy and a vaccine. The sooner we get, the less impactful this will be. But it creates issues.
Yeah, so time will tell, and as time goes on and we develop these solutions and the vaccine and the therapy, we'll be able to look forward to the future with at least a better resolution.
2 years from now, I think this is going to be a dreadful memory, and we will have impacting ways of living, right? So residential that is being built in New York City may have a small home office, alcove or something in every apartment in case something like this happens again. I think refrigerators are not getting to be smaller, they'll be larger. Freezers will be very important. So it will actually impact the marketplace, but will it stop people from going in and repopulating if in fact people left the cities? I think we will overcome that.
Okay, good. Wendy, a few questions for you, Wendy. Would you please just define quickly for us what a family office is? In simple terms, what's the structure and what is the basic function of a family office?
It's the hardest question to ask in family office, and everybody, and Kent's going to laugh, everybody has a different definition. So usually the way I explain it is this. If you have a very successful business, what typically happens is you grow your wealth. And the next thing you know, you're asking your CFO, who's great at managing real estate, to invest in private equity. And they don't know how to do that. And then you make the mistake of maybe sending out a charity check and handing it to your admin to mail out for you. And it's more than her annual salary. And she now hates you. These things happen. And at some point, what you need to do is you need to separate out your personal business from your core businesses that you have grown, that created your wealth. And when you start separating those out and bringing in specialists who can handle a wide variety of investments, your estate issues, your trusts, family legacy issues, you have created a family office. Done for a variety of reasons. The definitions have changed over the years. The amount of wealth required to do that has come down significantly. And I think part of that's technology. Part of that is that the financial marketplace doesn't have an adequate response to people maybe at a $50 million to $150 million range. And so people have gone to smaller and smaller family offices where we never saw them at below the $500 million range in the past. Now we do. And that's because they have some of the same issues as people who are above $500 million, but not really the resources and financial specialists. So they have gone to virtual family offices is one very good example. So the definition is it's a place where the family conducts its private business away from its operational business with specialists who can do that from legal to financial and across the board.
And if I can add, Zain, one of the things also is that the definition potentially of a family office has to do with some succession that has gone on, because a typical business starts, if you will, with a cult personality, right? So you've got this dynamic person who's an entrepreneur, he or she, and created a core business, whatever that core business is, and became very successful. So that cult personality, that individual who started that business, may go to the human resources person, if there is one, and say, oh, by the way, could you do this for me? And to an accounting person, could you go do this for human resources for me? Because the cult personality created a company, it grew, but it didn't always have corporate guidelines and definitions of who does what and how. It grew sort of intrinsically and up. Then the key to any family office to become a family office is succession. So how do you take succession from a cult personality, if you will, that creator, and pass it to a second, third, and fourth generation? in a successful way. And there's tension in that thing, because that cult personality individual would say, you know, come with me, leasing director, if I'm in real estate. And even though it's a meeting for an acquisition, but that's how things went. Then all of a sudden, the next generation comes in and says, oh no, we need to do it this way. We need to pigeonhole people a little bit. We need to have guidelines. We need to have structure. And that's a natural tension that goes on. So one of the things that exists today that did not 20 years ago is the concept of the business of family businesses. 25 years ago.
Ken is correct. Didn't
Right.
have it before, right?
Right. So
and now we have thousands
in my
of
family,
offices.
we went out and we engaged a person who was a facilitator just for, I'm third generation, just for our generation to figure out how to work together, how to do things. That was done 25 years ago. Nobody ever did those kind of things. You know, you'd have to look under therapists more or facilitators. They didn't have that. Now, the business of family business is a full-time industry in and of itself. So families can go to people like Wendy, who is the consummate professional and leader of both intelligence, trust, and experience, to be able to go get information and advice on what and how to do. So that shape is a relatively new type of business, but it's available.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And you brought up succession, and I think if I remember right from one of Wendy's trainings, first the cult personality's objective is accumulation, and then with G2 it's more preservation. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, there's a phenomenon in family office where, take what Kent said about statistics to heart, but about 90% of family offices at the third generational level lose their wealth. So, that goes to parenting, it goes to training, it goes to the sophistication of the family office to keep it together. And I feel the need to point out that for about 2% of family offices, there is no succession. They're part of the impact. They're going to give out 95% of their wealth on their death to charities. So it's very important. It's very important that you keep it together. It's very important that you pass down the values and the training and have that focal point of the family office for family members to go to.
Got it. And at Fulcrum Equities, what are some of your key responsibilities?
That Fulcrum is Kent's family office, and I'm chief of staff. So we look at the different investments, we look at legacy issues, we see different ways we can involve the next gens. Whether Kent will go into it or not, he's a third generation family member, so he has some experience in being the next gen down. So that's always foremost in our mind.
Okay. And how are the family offices that, you've spoken with, some of the other offices in your network, how has their overall strategy changed as we've moved into the pandemic? Are they looking at, different industries to maybe mitigate risk, or are they looking more opportunistically in certain sectors?
It's been fascinating. I've spent a lot, we've obviously, as Kent mentioned, we've all been locked down. And, we've all talked a lot, like, what are you doing? There's quite a few families that are just waiting this out. So they're sitting in cash. They're not going to do anything till they see where this is going. Are people going back to work? Is there going to be a real estate fallout? So they're just holding. They're kind of doing a buffet, if you will. Some of the families have gotten incredibly entrepreneurial. There's a family out in Ohio, and what they did is they took and they've invented a lot of machines that we all have in our homes. I won't mention them without permission since this is on YouTube, but what they did is they took this time, being very entrepreneurial and being a bunch of inventors, to create a home sanitation unit, real small. You can throw everything in there when you walk in the door, your phone, your glasses, your keys, it won't hurt any of it, and it sanitizes it the second you walk in the door. So they took this time, this pandemic, to come up with something new that everybody can use in their home, and they're just brilliant. Other families have stopped worrying about the things that we worry about daily for family office, and they've turned to their foundations and their charities. And you've probably seen some of this on the news, where they've effectively taken their charities and their foundations and used them to buy PPE for the hospitals in their cities and to help the healthcare workers in their neighborhoods and everything else. And a lot of them have given food to the food banks. It just goes on and on. So families have taken a different route. It may be more charitable work. It may be creating something that can be used, and it may be just holding. But it's been interesting.
There's another, anecdotally, there's another major family in the hospitality industry that right now is creating a $1 billion fund for friends and family only. So it's not going to be solicited and marketed on the outside only. And they're in the hotel business. So whether they buy back some of their hotels or others, but I don't say doubling down, but they believe that the hospitality industry will recover. They believe that travel will be an integral part of the world and its economy. And they also acknowledge and see that there is a great deal of strain right now in the hospitality industry, potentially more than any of the other industries there are. So with that, they are looking opportunistically to take advantage of that. So there's a Chinese character, which is crisis, which is also the same for opportunity. So with every crisis is an opportunity. There's a family that is actively going out now and taking the crisis of which they're in and finding and creating new opportunity at the same time. So their opportunity may buy some of their crisis issues or others. And it depends, what people are feeling internally, about this. If you're on the older side and way down the line, you might end up saying, we've done really well in our life. There's no need to go forward, and let's just, corral ourselves a little bit and see what happens. Others are saying, there's opportunity here. We have to weigh what we have, but that doesn't mean we don't want to shift and move. I'll give you an example. I had been reading about the difficulty in getting masks and other PPE because I've been involved with a cryptocurrency company called REDinNYC. We have a mining operation where we mine for cryptocurrency up in Messina, New York, where Ethereum and other coins. So we have all the computers, everything comes from China. The guy who runs that for us, has been doing this for decades in China and has great connections for all things in China made, including, masks and other medical. And we have political connections with, governors and others. So I couldn't understand how I could find all the PPE that's out there and yet others couldn't, because logistics, everything was crazy. So we ended up forming a company. Two of my sons, Simon and Oliver, formed a company that is now providing medical gloves, masks, etc., for all the medical and states and governments that are out there because of our access. So here, in a normal course of business, I would have no business, frankly, going into this kind of thing. But because there's been such chaos and such dislocation in this business, we were able to form a company called KOSMED, K-O-S-MED, and to respond back to the medical community to provide all of their needs. And we worked our way, my kids have worked their way into direct connections with 3M, et cetera. So this posts an unbelievable opportunity, which came from altruistic reasons, but now is turned into a full business. So those are the kind of things that are happening. The example I've used is if you wanted to go into the rental car business 5 months ago, pretty tough thing to go through. You had Hertz, Avis, National, all these car companies that had locked in all the airports, locked in hotels, et cetera, and all the travel related. Today, Hertz is, if they haven't filed bankruptcy, they're about to, it's a whole different world. So if you wanted to gain access into that business, which was locked out, primarily, you have an open door to go do that. So creativity and ingenuity is really very opportunistic at times like this. It's a brand new day and a level playing field for almost everybody right now. And if you don't have legacy issues, what a great opportunity. Out of pain, yes. But still, from a business perspective, that you can go into things that you never would dream of before.
Yeah, those are two great examples of creativity and, creating opportunity with your PPE company and, the friend who's raising that fund to buy back hotels. Because, I mean, nobody's going to stop traveling. Everybody wants to go to new cities, explore new countries, locations, foods safely. That's right. That's right.
So that's
So
the
we
key.
need the vaccine first.
How do we define that? And that's really what a lot of this verges on. When do we go back to work? When do we get to travel? When all of it, again, it's therapy related and vaccine related.
And now, Wendy, in your answer to the last question, you mentioned there are things that some family offices worry about day to day. I'm curious about what is the most pressing issue for family offices right now?
Well, the most pressing issue is, are they going to get sick? I think that's the most pressing issue for everybody. I honestly don't think wealth makes a difference. People are concerned. They're also concerned, depending on their asset classes, how that will function. They're concerned, it's what Ken said, they want to go back to normal. They want to be back to normal, but it also depends on where you are in the country. In certain areas of this country, and I'm going to pick on poor Tennessee, they've had 300 deaths. Most people there don't even know somebody who got sick, but they know somebody very clearly who doesn't have their job because of this. So the families in different states do have different concerns. They don't want to get sick, but some of their concerns are more economic related. Can I keep all my employees on? When can I start my businesses again? How do I do that? I think where the areas were hit harder, at least I've noticed, Kent, you might have a different take, that it's a lot more altruistic. Like, how can I help my community? Because we got hit so hard. So I think geography plays a little bit into the play. And I think in states that have a sparser population, they're going to be up and running a lot quicker than we are. But their concerns are the same as every American. How am I going to keep going? Is somebody sick? What do I do next? And this uncertainty is really killing us.
From a business perspective, the first thing is health and safety, no doubt. Yep. The second is survivability of your business. Can one's business survive? And what does it take to do that? So what are your cash reserves in your business? What is your operating ability to continue to generate income in your business? And can you maintain your current expense ratio going forward? So, the reserves are one thing, your income is another, and then you have to find out, can you continue to keep everybody gainfully employed in your company to ride the storm out? And those are different answers on a host of different types of companies. The questions are the same for a lot of the family businesses, but the answers vary, right? If you're in the hospitality industry and you are a private hotel company, your how much cash reserve is a big issue right now. Your income question is zero potentially, and your ability to carry your staff is probably pretty low. On the other hand, if you are, a real estate company, the question is, what are your reserves? That's an answer. The second question then ultimately becomes, what is your income? What percentage of your tenants are paying rent to you, and therefore how much of your staff can you keep? In the case where for Terra Holdings we have 60 offices plus or minus with Brown, Harris, Stevens, and Halstead, those offices are closed right now for health and safety issues. So how much? So reserve is our private question. Our income is clearly, it's diminished dramatically, right? Because if you don't have offices functioning and you don't have people showing homes, apartments, condos, etc., your income is dropped rather dramatically. And then what is your capability, which is part of the first question of reserves, to maintain all of your staff in there? When it opens up, you're going to be in a good position. Some of the companies that, fortunately for Terra Holdings, we have no debt. We're a private company, we're nimble, but there are other companies that are out there, frankly, that are based on raising money all the time because their business plan of massive expansion has been based on huge ability to raise capital, and they cannot run their operation just on the income they make. And I would say even if they got 100% market share, they won't make money going forward. I'm talking about Compass. Their ability has been based on, frankly, generating great revenue, and they keep saying their value of their company has increased. But now, with things there, their ability, can they continue to raise money in order to support their infrastructure? And I don't want to diminish, but they are the WeWork of the residential marketplace. Their basis was great growth with raising money from SoftBank and acquisition and buying market share and huge valuations. Well, now the musical chairs have stopped. Can they continue to raise money on valuations that were, I think, hyperinflated in order to support the infrastructure they had? Because the catch up of income generation to meet that is all going to be dependent on their reserve structure. And so those are things that are going to be happening now that when people are on a cycle, this has got disrupted, that could be potentially very disastrous for certain companies.
And let me just jump in here too, because we have kind of two classes of family offices. We have family offices that do own businesses, but we also have some family offices that have liquidated. So primarily their assets would be investments. And a lot of those investments, as everybody was watching the stock market do its roller coaster ride this spring, have changed. So even though they don't have a business, they're very, very concerned because, like Kent said, what comes in there is that's their income. That's what they plan on. That's the amount they live on. And now that's drastically changed. So whether they have a business or not, those principles hold true.
Yeah. And initially in your answer, you brought up that each family has different priorities and each family has different needs. So it'll be interesting to see how everybody navigates this going forward. But for a bit of advice for our audience members, let's say there's a service provider right now who's watching, who has identified that a family office has a particular need for their service. Wendy, what would be the right way to approach that family office in this virtual environment?
Well, they can't go to the office, so
can't do that.
I usually appreciate somebody sending me an email or reaching out on LinkedIn. I have to tell you, I'm a little zoomed out. I have folks that I've talked to for 15 years, and now they can't even say hello to me without trying to set up a Zoom call. And it's fun, and I get it. But I don't want to do 20 Zoom calls a day either. I want to save those for business. So I tell people, reach out to me on LinkedIn. If it's something we're interested in, happy to talk to you. If you happen to have my email, send me an email. I do try to tell people that a lot of folks are in my situation where we're homeschooling children at home and younger children who need a lot of help. So when you are calling somebody's cell phone, remember they're not in the office. They may be trying to help a teacher help their child and have their hours set aside for work. So don't just call them up on their cell phone and assume they'll be able to talk to you. I had a few call me while I was standing in one of the infamous grocery lines about a month ago. I'm like, I can't do this right now. So be kind. Text first, email first, LinkedIn first, and say, is there a time that you can set aside in some isolated area of your home so we can speak? That's the best way.
The other thing I would say is do your homework, right? So
yes.
If you have if your business is whatever it is, you need to do your homework of who needs this kind of business, why do they need this kind of business, and not just throw out, and say, hey, I can do this. Really go in and rifle shot or rifle shoot instead of shotgun the type of client that you're looking to get a hold of. So you need to give them a reason why they need your business. And that means that's just calling and getting on the phone, and because somebody says, no, thank you, you're finished, right? You need to offer an enticement, something interesting, either intellectually interesting or financially interesting, that really takes your business and insightfully shows why it's impactful for their business. And I think that homework isn't done a lot enough. You get people cold calling, they have a great name, they got their phone number, and they don't source and think it out. Like when I want somebody to come up with an answer, or to me, you've got to manipulate a program of questions that lead them to a conclusion on their own that you want them to have. So if you answer your own question, it doesn't really help. But if you ask a question knowing that that person is going to answer in a certain way, their answers are going to actually sell your product to them. So that takes some research, some work, and then you also don't get, thank you very much, it's been very nice, click. So,
and Ken, how many times have you had somebody cold call you? I've had this happen repeatedly where they have no idea what we do.
completely.
That we do a lot of things, but a lot of it's real estate. And they're like, oh, really? And
I'll
it's
give
like,
you
come
a
on.
great example. I had a person who was an uncle of a very close friend of mine come in, and the friend called and said, this is pre-COVID, I really would like you to meet my uncle. He's got a great deal. He's got great deals for you. He wants to show you these buildings. They think they'll be perfect for you to go buy. Sounds, out of respect to him, I took the meeting. So the guy comes in and tells me, I have these buildings, they're perfect for you, etc. And I said, what are they? Let me see. No, let me talk about them. So he talks about them. They sound interesting. Then he shows them. I owned 5 of the buildings already. So he had an unauthorized document, and I said, when I looked at it, I said, you hit a home run. He goes, well, I said, these buildings are absolutely 100% perfect for me. He goes, so what are you going to do?
In fact, they're
I said,
already
nothing.
mine.
I own them already. So I mean, that's a true story. That is the ultimate cold call that the person they'd never done a single bit of homework. So he's offering stuff that I own. That didn't go very far. So that's an extreme case, but that's what happens. You've got to really do your homework in there and understand. And it's much more effective that way, obviously.
Yeah, and being thoughtful and strategic in their outreach, I could imagine, because I don't know if you would ever do business with him again after seeing how he wasn't thorough in identifying who the
it was
owners
a little surprising. No, it did. It gave me pause when he presented other things to me. That's for sure.
And Wendy, you wanted to say something?
Just that, it's very disconcerting to jump on the phone with somebody you don't know because they asked for a meeting with you. And the first question out of their mouth is, so tell us all about you and the family you work for and how they made their wealth. I don't know you. Yeah, I have no idea who you are. And you should know quite a bit of that if, as Kent said, you did your homework. So you don't have to start a conversation with, tell me everything about you so I can see if my product works for you. Again, do your homework. Know it should work for me first. And not because you need to sell it, but because it really would help me.
That's some sound advice there. So thank you for sharing. Shifting things to office buildings and commercial real estate. There was a headline in a Wall Street Journal article on May 21st that talked about how Facebook intends to permanently shift towards a remote work environment after coronavirus, but they're signing that lease. Like, I wanted to probe more earlier, but we were talking about residential. So let's talk about that. What's causing that discrepancy between what they're saying and what they're actually doing?
Well, I don't think they're saying two different things. I think they're saying there will be people from like Facebook working from home much more. So will people go in 5 days a week to the office? Maybe not. Maybe it'll be 2 or 3 days a week, but it will not replace office work. So will offices be differently structured? Yes. Probably the biggest the biggest issue facing office space is vertical transportation. Putting how many people in an elevator is, so you have a 50-story building, you're going to put 20 people in an elevator? Not anymore. So could you get 2 to 4 in each corner? Maybe. Yes. That's going to create a very big issue going forward of how you get people up to higher buildings. So that's something that's unique. Will it be overcome once we have a therapy and a vaccine? Yes. But here's the thing. Let's take a look at New York City in the late 70s when things were very, very difficult. And New York had a big problem. And if we remember, the New York went to the federal government, and President Gerald Ford looked at New York and said, literally, quote, drop dead. We're not bailing you out. And it recovered, and we get into the mid 80s, and J.C. Penney, which was on 6th Avenue in their headquarter building, said, things are getting expensive. New York is still difficult. we are moving to Plano, Texas. So they picked up their entire operation and moved to Plano, Texas. They built a beautiful campus. They had a gorgeous lake with bike paths and running paths, and they had gymnasiums, and they had dining halls, and they created an unbelievable campus for themselves. One of the first companies to do that. And what happened to them? They got stale. All their people only spoke to all their people. All their ideas were looking inward, not outward, and it doesn't work. The stimulation and idea flow and opportunity and creativity was squashed. So why does Facebook want to have center city locations? Because they are on the cutting edge of ideas and technology and creativity. And that doesn't happen by being in a void, working from home. If I'm working from home, how am I going to go meet new people unless I cold call them? If I'm in my own office, how am I going to meet my fellow colleagues? Yes, you can have Zoom parties or other things, but that is very, very different. The natural give and take of interaction, going to a restaurant and bumping into somebody. Oh, you work at Facebook? I work at Facebook. How great. Walking and bumping into somebody in the elevator and all that. Safety first, yes, but that opportunity and creativity is gone. So will this replace office space? No. Will office space as a business maybe change? Yes, potentially. What could change? People could be splitting offices. So if you have a lot of your work staff working in New Jersey, commuting into Manhattan, maybe you take and you have makeup. This is made up 50,000 square feet in Manhattan. Maybe you now take 15,000 feet in New Jersey and say, these people, you can work from here 2 days a week, and the other 3 days come into Manhattan. We're splitting operation. Why? We have less public transportation issues, so that will be for safety issues. You can work closer to home right now. Those are the kind of things that may be changing. But getting people together in an office, I think, is an irreplaceable function of creativity and opportunity. And so efficiency may be met, but efficiency doesn't lead to great creativity and opportunity. So overall, I'm bullish for office space. In the short term, it's going to be an issue, and our physical way of doing business is going to change. Spacing is going to change. You know, for my office alone right now, we're looking, I don't want people commuting in public transportation during the peak rush hour time. So we are going to start our office hours for certain people later. They will be able to go home earlier to disperse people so they don't have to have more risk at public transportation. One of the great things about New York City is its public transportation. One of the big challenges we are facing is public transportation right now. So in Los Angeles, everybody gets in a bubble, their car, and they drive to and from work. It's disastrous, in my opinion, and difficult, but safety-wise, you know, they're in a better place. So I think when we get, again, a vaccine and or a therapy, all that will start to take a second seat back and we'll move on. And hopefully the next president of the United States will take the CDC much more seriously and treat this as a sixth branch of our national safety and security. So office-wise, I'm a little bit, you know, I'm optimistic over the next 12 months going forward.
All right. And as New York begins to take steps to get back to work, what precautionary measures, you know, you bring up the elevator, right, which is a concern of everyone. What precautionary measures are office building owners like yourself taking to ensure that facilities, that touch points are cleaned and that everything's done to reduce the possibility of viral transmission?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, buildings are now putting more staff out to clean almost hourly any touch point, whether they're elevator buttons or railings or door openings, etc. Two, there is a material, and I'm just name challenged. It's the word, it starts with an N, I forget what it is, and they're on the mask. You can apply this material and it is resistant to the coronavirus. So the coronavirus cannot stick on this material. So that makes it safe against the virus itself. So those are some of the easy things. Plexiglass at the concierge desk, those are easy things. If you have a center core building, when you exit out or your office to go to the restroom, one-way corridors, right? So you don't have people bumping into each other. So you have to go on a one-way corridor. That keeps traffic flow better. We have a full floor in our office, one person in the bathroom at a time, unless it's a very, very large bathroom. Kitchens, a different way and protocol of making coffee. You can't have communal coffee being made, right? You have to have individual packets. We already have that, but those are things that you're going to have to do. Conference rooms, small conference rooms are not going to be able to be utilized the way they were. All of the things that we wanted in connections, all the living room spaces and offices that are promoting interactivity, which is creativity and opportunity for people, are going to have to take a second seat behind health and safety first. So it will be different, and it will start to get back. In 1987, New York City average amount of office space per person was about 300 square feet per person. We've worked our way down to about 180 square feet per person. So we pack more people in, more open cubicles, all under the guise of one, efficiency and saving money, but also under the guise of interaction with people. That now is going to have to be separated out a little bit. So will it get back again when we have safety and security? Yes, but in the meantime, you're going to disperse people. So it will be impactful. I think the transportation vertically elevators is probably the biggest impact. How do you get a lot of people up to a building quickly when you can only have a very small amount of people in an elevator? Those are issues.
Yeah. And, earlier when we spoke about cash flow in keeping businesses healthy, I wanted to know about, with your office buildings, have there been any tenants who haven't been able to pay their rent in the last few months? And if so, what's the dialogue like, with those tenants? Are there any arrangements that could be made? Are you renegotiating lease terms? What's happening with those tenants who can't pay their rent?
Well, the answer is yes, there are tenants that cannot pay the rent. My family's portfolio, plus or minus 10 million square feet, we are fortunate that we're in the low 90s on most of our properties, some, down to the high mid 80s. And let's not forget, it's only been 2 months of rent. Now we're in our third month that we're impacted. April was, a lot of rents were queued up to be paid. So we've got April, May, and June. We're just entered our third month where this is impacting. And I will tell you, for large institutions, I think they continue to be able to pay. There are some smaller tenants that are difficult. Retail, most of them are not paying because they've been decimated in the business. And so what a lot of landlords are looking to do is to take, first you find out, did you get the PPP, the payment protection plan, payroll protection plan, because that gives you money. So then if you got to ask questions of your tenants, I'm a proactive tenant friendly type landlord. So I want to know what's going on with them. How can we help them? What can we do? If they did get that, that means they can contribute up to 25% of the money they got in rent. So they should be paying something. So what are we doing? We're looking at working with tenants, different tenants for different things, but pay something. We will forego some rent, and we can amortize it over the balance of your term potentially, or tell us what's going on with what it is. We've got properties in Los Angeles that have a lot of medical related. Now the medical is being hit very, very hard because their business cannot happen. So the essential business is only COVID related. That means even people who need cancer things and others have been put in a secondary position. That is starting to change now. Things are coming back, but it does impact. If you've got hotels, any portion you have a combination building, that piece of your building is being hit hard. Your retail being being hit hard. So travel related businesses as tenants in commercial buildings, those have been hit very, very hard. Other businesses, aren't as much. If you're Netflix and other things, businesses seem to be doing pretty well, So you have to take a look at every individual tenant and what their needs are, and in my opinion, to work with them. Owning a building may be a wonderful thing, but they're empty. They don't provide anything to you. The humans in those buildings provide everything to you. They provide rent, they provide support, they provide energy, etc. So I encourage people to take a humanistic approach and to understand the monetary issues, but it's a humanistic approach because tenants are humans. The buildings are just inanimate objects. And so to hide behind and say you're a building owner, that's not what we are. We are tenant service providers. Now, we happen to house them in a building, but our business is tenant service providers. So you got to know your business and work with the tenants.
Right. Now, you mentioned that, there was, you mentioned that some of the bigger firms and institutions have been paying their rent on time. Does this change how you evaluate prospective tenants going forward?
It could, but I'm gonna take the assumption that we will get through the COVID virus, and that with 2 years, this will be a very painful memory that will be impacting our ongoing businesses. But this isn't something that we're going to evaluate every day of looking at each tenant. But yes, if you had a tenant that was in the hospitality business, Hilton hotels, Marriott hotels, Hyatt hotels, whatever, they're your tenant in your building. I would think that tenant, looking at them now, if they wanted to move in, would have a different financial review than a tenant that was supplying medical devices, masks to hospitals. That financial review might be a different one. So yes, it's going to impact a little bit of that time. And until things start to restabilize and get back, it's going to be one of the lenses that you look through when evaluating your tenants.
Got it. And final question, one question for each of you. Let's fast forward to that time when we do have the vaccine, we do have the therapy. What are you most optimistic for looking forward? Let's start with Wendy.
I'm optimistic about a lot of things. As bad as this has been, I think it's really revealed some things about our society, who we are as a people, that we need to fix, that we may have gone on not addressing for the next 20 years, but for this. So while I am sad and very sad about what has happened and the unemployment and the deaths, I'm also optimistic that we have fresh eyes on some of the things we really need to fix. And I'll leave it at that.
Very well said, Wendy. That's good. I'm optimistic about the strength and resolve of our human interaction with one another, the collective interaction. And that is what I sorely miss. I'm a people person. And I'm looking forward to getting back where we have 2 year, whatever period of time that we've got the social interaction. And I will further with Wendy, what she said is that I think this has given us a moment of pause and reflection to look at our society and our strengths and our weaknesses. And I would say one of our strengths is social, united interaction. And what you're seeing on the streets and the demonstrations, the peaceful demonstrations, in a time that people are afraid to be around people, that we are locked in our homes, sheltering in place, that a horrendous event occurred in Minneapolis that has taken and put people into the streets for good purposes, literally risking their lives for the greater good of humanity. So that shows you how much human interaction and our collective purpose resides in all of us and the strength of that. And that is what America is really about. So I'm looking forward to getting to be able to do that again in a safe environment. And I think we will have a different set of focus and a different set of eyes because of this, all for the better, frankly.
Those are fantastic answers. Well said, Wendy, and well said, Kent. We thank you both for your time, for coming on REDinNYC and sharing your perspectives on this coronavirus pandemic and the issues that our city is faced with. So again, thank you both so much. And to our viewers who are joining us, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next talk.
That's great.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Wendy. Have a great day, everybody. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.